Hi, and welcome to this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall, the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us once again for his turn in the rotation, State Representative Paul Schmid from Westport, who also represents part of New Bedford. Thanks for coming in again.
Hello, Jim. It's just it's always a pleasure to be with you. And this is January, and we have just watched the inauguration of our new president.
We do have a new president and a new vice president,
Yes.
the first woman vice president. So
First.
lots happening politically, and first of all, congratulations. We haven't seen you since before the election, so congratulations to you on your re-election.
Thank you. Well, this is true. We have not seen each other since before
I think it was
November.
September was when you were last in. So congrats on that.
Thank you. It's just an honor to represent the 8th Bristol District again. I can't believe I have now served 10 years. As they say, time flies when you're having fun, and I enjoy what I do, and it's just an honor to represent people.
Nothing's happened in the last 4 months. It's been really quiet for you. Obviously, besides the re-election, we have a new speaker as well. Things have changed in 4 months.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I just want to take a little issue with you that nothing has happened. We, just 2 weeks ago, we completed the 2019-2020 term.
Yeah, I'm being facetious here.
At 4:30 in the morning.
When was the last time you did an all-nighter?
I'm thinking back to college
Yeah,
days.
exactly.
What about you?
I can't stay up that late.
And people say, well, what the heck, couldn't you get it done earlier? And the answer is, as I have now learned in politics is all about getting people to agree on something. And oftentimes, they won't agree until it's the last minute and there's no more time. So the time was running out on our term, and we got done climate bill, we got an economic development bill done, a police reform bill, a transportation bond bill. Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is, with the pandemic, I think when you were in here last time, one of the things you talked about is the lack of one-on-one relationship talks with your colleagues. You're just not able to do the job as you had before, and I think you had said, that's one of the difficulties with this pandemic, is that you're not being able to talk to your colleagues about legislation and initiatives that you'd like to get done.
That's absolutely true. You really miss those opportunities. You're in the hall of the State House. I see Chris Markey. I said, Chris, tell me about that bill. I don't quite understand it. He'll say, oh yeah, there's this. And you don't get that in virtual meetings.
Right, and so that's, I think, when things get pushed back, the pandemic just forced everything to get pushed back. So it's good that obviously the things get done. Tell us a little bit at the start here. There is a new speaker.
Yes.
Mariano, Representative Mariano from Quincy, just taking the speakership. What are you expecting now from, you've been up there a long time now, what are you expecting from a new speaker?
Ron Mariano, I think is going to be a great speaker. He is a great listener, and he spends a lot of time just sitting in his seat in the chamber, and people will come up and sit down and chat with him, and sometimes it's just personal chat, and sometimes it's talking about an issue or a bill. And he has said that he intends to continue to be available. And I think that could be a hallmark of his speakership, that he will have been available to people. Makes a big difference when you listen.
And he's been a state representative for a while, so that experience, I would assume, is helpful for that role.
True. Yes, he's been majority leader for 12 years, I believe.
Yeah.
I think the entire nearly 12-year speakership of Bob DeLeo.
So he has relationships with the body as well, other than the new representatives, obviously, that were just elected, but he's got relationships with many of your colleagues.
Yes, he does, on both sides of the aisle, by the way. So that's going to help him lead us. Not so easy leading 160 cats.
As we're talking now, obviously the pandemic is still full front and center for everything that's going on right now. Vaccines are being distributed. From your perspective right now, where do we stand right now? The state's response to it, the rollout of the vaccines, just sort of your overall impression of where we stand right now.
Sure. Well, as you know, we are in phase 1, and we've worked our way down to the 4th part of phase 1. I think that we are learning as we go along. We've never done anything like this before. There's no playbook. And I give the governor a lot of credit for his focus on the numbers. I know that the most constituent requests we're hearing right now are, when do I get my vaccine?
Yeah.
What's going on? And we just have to keep communicating to people that there is a plan. Right now, we're working on the 4th section of the first phase, and we'll soon, probably by mid-February, get to the 2nd phase, which is led off by folks with 2 comorbidities or more and age 75 and over. What holds us back from being even more precise communicators is the fact that we don't know how many vaccines we're going to get each week until the week in advance.
Mm-hmm. So that's hard. I mean, so the planning process obviously is really just 1 week when you really think about it.
There can be a theoretical process and plan, but it's just a week that we actually know what we're getting.
I know some states right now have gone about the process with all their vaccines. They're trying to get as many people the first shot as possible, not really worrying about the second shot. Is that something that you think is the right move? I know Massachusetts hasn't done that yet. They're still right now on target to do the first shot, and then 3 to 4 weeks later, you get the second shot.
Yes.
But there are some states I know that are doing just the first shot and worrying about the second shot down the road.
Right.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah. So right now we're getting about 100,000 vaccines a week, 80 to 100. And we're hoping that that's going to ramp up in February so that we can continue moving forward, getting folks their first vaccine, and also cycle back. For instance, right now we're hopeful that we'll be able to give the first responders their second shot. Now, they just had their first shot last week. I was over at UMass Dartmouth, where the first responders from Westport and Dartmouth were getting their first shot, and it was really gratifying to see that happen. And we are hoping that they will get their second shot about mid-February.
What about, and I don't know if the body can do anything with this, but I know one of the challenges, we had a COVID roundtable, if you will, talking that one of the biggest issues facing is making sure people actually go to get the shots. Is there some sort of I don't want to say plan or campaign to urge people to get the shots when it's their turn and when it becomes available? Because there are some that are just not going to get it. They don't want to get it.
That's absolutely true. And you talk about the urgency of making sure that people get their shots. That's one of the issues, that each day, as you know, the vaccines have a certain shelf life.
Yep.
And each day, as they get towards the end of the day, they have to try to figure out who didn't show and then quickly reach out to others so that no vaccine goes wasted. And there is that issue that not everybody feels comfortable in getting the vaccine now. And I think there's been a lot of talk, well, how do you convince people? And for instance, the first responders, my chief in Westport said to those firemen who are not sure, about all I can do is roll up my sleeve and take that shot myself.
So is it important for people to see you, like if your constituents see you getting the shot, do you think that's helpful for them?
I think that it's important for them to see that all members of their community are getting the shot. Sure, the first responders, the elected officials, teachers, yeah.
When you were here last, we had a lot of talk about the state budget. At that time, there was still a lot of unanswered questions. A budget has finally passed.
Yes.
And I know, obviously, with your experience, it's always a fluid document, even during the course of the year.
Yeah.
But you still don't have a lot of answers from the federal government as well right now with the existing budget. Tell us a little bit about where we stand, I guess, as far as the budget. We're halfway through the fiscal year.
Sure we are. And as you recall, starting about in March of this year, as we started to look at the 2021 budget, which begins July 1st, we had some very serious concerns about the level of taxes that we would be taking in. There were some forecasts that said we were going to have as much as a $6 to $8 billion shortfall.
And I know I think $3 billion of the rainy day fund got used.
So in the end, to write the budget, which we didn't do until November.
Right.
And the reason we didn't do that is that we didn't know what we would receive from the federal government, which was an important component.
And you still don't know, really.
Still don't know, although we're beginning to, I think, narrow down the variables.
Yep.
And we've also had the experience of 6 months of tax collection.
Mm-hmm.
And to everyone's surprise, tax receipts have been better than the very pessimistic forecasts of March and April. So right now we are scheduled to take out of our rainy day fund about $1.5 billion.
Okay.
And that was out of a $3.5 billion rainy day fund.
I was amazed. I saw an article in the paper not too long ago. I think it was earlier, it may have been last week, but the state is down like 7,000 employees.
Yes.
That's a lot of employees. I know obviously private sectors have been hit too, but the state has taken a hit employee-wise.
Yes, I saw the same article. It showed the head count that in fact total state employees are down. And of course, as a taxpayer, we like to see that. We like to see constant efficiency increases, which can allow us to either do more or in some cases actually not replace people and allow that head count to drop. On the other hand, as people who are held responsible for the delivery of services, takes people.
Right.
Takes people to educate our children. Takes people to make sure we're safe in our homes. Takes people to keep Horseneck Beach and Freetown State Park looking like the places we want to visit.
Well, the interesting thing too is, for example, like you go with the MBTA, which is not fully state, but it's subsidized by the state and whatever, and you read the arguments or the issues that nobody's riding the trains, so therefore we need to cut service, cut personnel. But then if you cut the personnel, you expect things to go back, I would assume, and I don't know if the answer is as easy as people make it out to be.
Never is it?
No.
By the way, on transportation, as you know, the local delegation has been very forceful in maintaining the funding for our local transportation.
Well, we talked about commuter rail and we've talked about the train coming to New Bedford, and then you wonder, with all this going on and the cuts to the MBTA, well, even if we get the tracks built, is there actually going to be service because they've cut service?
Yes.
And I don't think there's an answer to that yet, but
No. Well, we are vigilant about, number one, making sure that that commuter rail does happen. And I think the good news is that in that transportation bill that we passed 2 weeks ago, early in the morning, that gives further funding to make sure that we get up and running. And now they're saying, what are you hearing, 2022, 2023, I think?
yeah, something like that. Yep.
Yeah. And you know that's going to make a big difference.
Right.
Our friends in real estate already talk about how there's much more interest from folks in other parts of the state about our real estate here.
And the gas tax, at least as far as I know, wasn't part of any transportation bill right now.
Well, that's right. We as a House passed a 5-cent gas tax a year ago, and the economy was very different.
Right.
When we had a chance to finally vote on the bill, we did not put that gas tax in. It's not the right time.
Well, and I think you had mentioned before, when you're talking a gas tax, it's the people here that are going to Boston or going places that are going to be paying that gas tax.
Yes.
Versus other locations, I guess.
Yes, and we have seen, of course, that it's been really a tale of two economies, hasn't it? We've seen so many people being able to work from home,
right?
So they're not commuting and they're not buying gas, but folks in everyday jobs, the folks who are working in the supermarkets, who are working in the hospitals and so on, they still have to get to work. They're not stocking those supermarket shelves from home.
And that's why the public transportation is such a huge critical part of it, because even here in New Bedford and obviously in the surrounding towns, I mean, the buses, people are still going on them. You still see people waiting for them.
You bet.
So to cut services...
That's how they get to work.
Right. To cut services, again, because there's not as many people, I mean, I don't know the answer, but it just seems to me you can't cut it just because it's not making as much money.
No. No. And we have made sure that the funding for our local transportation here, the bus line, CERTA, we have made sure that the funding was not cut for that.
And I know they've cut some lines, some routes.
Some routes.
Right.
Yep.
But, I mean, the service is still being there. I wanted to touch upon one of the big issues you and I talked about before that has finally been passed, police reform. I mean, you were talking about some of the challenges that were in the legislation or being discussed at that time. The bill has passed, but you've got some people saying it went too far, and some people saying it didn't go far enough. I don't know if that's the definition of a good bill, but what's your assessment on the legislation that actually did get passed and was signed by the governor?
Well, as you know, the bill that was ultimately signed by the governor was different from what the House and Senate passed initially. And I was one of those who actually voted against the bill as it was initially passed by the House. I felt that to have a police review board with no police members was just the wrong way of doing things. That didn't strike me as being a balance. Look, we all know that we need to have more community involvement. And here in New Bedford, our chief has done a fabulous job about creating community involvement himself. And he has led by example, but other communities have not been as fortunate. And so we needed to do something, but it's got to be balanced, as with everything. So I could not support a bill that had no police on the review board. Because a number of people had voted against the bill, we could not sustain the governor's veto, and the governor then proposed some changes to it, including putting police on the review board. And with those changes, I felt that we had had a more balanced bill.
I know you talked to both Chief Cordero and your chief in Westport. I'm curious in your conversations with them, are they saying the same thing about the challenges that their departments are facing? You're talking a small town versus a city. But I'm wondering if the job of the police chief, I would assume there's more similarities than people might think.
Oh, Jim, absolutely. Yeah, you know, little old Westport, population 15,000, New Bedford population maybe 100,000. We're
Right.
kind of hoping that the census that we've just completed
Right.
may put us over that mark, because if we do, then we're in line for some funding streams that you don't get at under 100,000. But so there's a big difference in population, but actually at the end of the day, the challenges that our police face are very much the same. And talking to Chief in New Bedford, talking to the chief in Westport, they both tell me that getting young people to consider putting that badge on now is their biggest challenge, and that things have really changed from when they were entering to now. When they went in, you listened to the police, and they carried the community. Now, as we know, things are very different, and getting young people to believe that service to the community can be done by putting that badge on every day is a real challenge. That's what they tell me the biggest challenge
Yep.
is.
Do you see that the police reform bill is sort of a baseline? Is that something that over the years the legislation theoretically, I guess, can be tweaked or what have you? Like there's improvements that can be made over the course of time?
Yes, I think I would say that it being the first attempt within many people's legislative lives to do that, just like the education reform
Right.
back in the early 90s, was a start, but now 2 years ago, required a further improvement. I'm sure that there will be tweaks and improvements to it.
I mean, that's just, I guess that's the normal progression of legislation when you really think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The one of the other things that I've been reading too a lot about is and we talked about the speaker moments ago, but House rules. I know there are some of your colleagues, some newly elected colleagues, would like to see a more open House and Senate. You know, there's criticism that the House and legislation is done in secret.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And do you feel as though the House is open right now with the way they conduct business? And I guess what can be done to improve that?
Sure. Well, I've read some surveys that indicate that government in Massachusetts, compared to all others around the country, is pretty open. I love our committee structure. To be able to serve on a committee, as I did, for instance, on Ways and Means last term, and to have so many people come in and give testimony on both sides of an issue it's really instructive to those of us who ultimately have to vote on it.
But I know one of the things that they've talked about is giving, I guess, 72 hours before when you receive a legislation, you get 72 hours to vote on it before. You can't just do it, I guess, the next day.
Right. No. And I know that Speaker DeLeo, leadership, or we as a body, did get criticized, have been criticized for voting on significant bills at the last minute. And I would, just as a representative, I would just say the more time we have to look at a bill, and 72 hours would be helpful, the better, no question. You get better debate on it.
Of course, you said at the start, which is interesting too, people don't make decisions until the last minute.
So that's the, yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, the bills, as far as I know, you can see the bills online. But again, I understand too, is if a bill is just passed, or not passed, but is brought up for a vote, and it's 24 hours later, some people might not even see that bill either. I guess there's arguments to be made on both sides.
Yes, there are, and I have to say that during the course of a bill's history, getting through the legislature, there are so many opportunities to weigh in on a bill as it goes through, and there's so much discussion back and forth. When it ultimately comes out, you may not have seen every last clause, but you've got a pretty darn good idea of what the bill is trying to accomplish and how it does it.
The other thing too is, I mean, that's where your staff comes in. I mean, people call, and sure they hope to get you, but that's where your staff takes the call and takes their concerns and relays them to you.
Right, right. So that all goes into the process, and it is not as though bills suddenly materialize out of the ether and an hour later we vote. That's far from it.
We got about a minute and a half here to go. I just wanted to see this coming legislative year, your priorities or anything that you're looking to get through this year. It must be tough right now, obviously, because of COVID, but is there anything in particular that you're focused on here as you start the year?
Well, you're right. COVID, getting through COVID takes first priority, and it will certainly be the end of the summer before we can finally say we're looking back at COVID. But meantime, a lot of the legislative work goes on, and for me, I want to keep working on this issue of producing more of our food within the Commonwealth and getting it into the underserved urban areas where everybody admits we need more healthy food in urban areas. And it ought to be locally produced, because that grows the economy and becomes a win-win. So that area is something that I've been working on. We've had some successes, particularly here in New Bedford. And the next time we talk, Jim, let's just remember to talk about the work that's going on here to use locally sourced food products.
And the interesting thing too, because you represent Westport, which is a farming community, those farmers are growing things that benefit the New Bedford residents. In theory, that's what happens. So
it's a win-win.
Exactly. It's good seeing you again. We will see you in a few months, but thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm looking forward. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about what we're doing. Yeah, thanks, Jim.
State Representative Paul Schmid has been our guest on the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.